Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a quiet mechanic builds his dream garage by the book, he never expects war with the HOA president. But when lies, forged letters, and secret power plays surface, one man must fight back with proof, persistence, and an unexpected ally from the shadows. I bought the house at the edge of Willow Creek 5 years ago because it was the last lot on the map and the first one to disappear into trees. One side faced the neighborhood with its identical mailboxes and carefully measured lawns. The other backed straight into a wall of forest that smelled like wet leaves and freedom. As an auto mechanic who spent his days bringing old engines back from the dead, I liked the idea of coming home to a place where no one cared how loud my thoughts were. I paid my mortgage on time, waved at neighbors when I saw them, and mostly kept to myself. That worked just fine for everyone. Or at least, I thought it did. The garage had been a dream long before it became a structure. I had spent years working out of cramped spaces, renting storage units, borrowing lifts from friends, and crawling under cars in conditions that made chiropractors rich. I wanted a real workshop. Not a shiny showroom, just a solid functional space where I could work on my projects without tripping over my own ambition. So I saved. I skipped vacations, turned down unnecessary upgrades, and said no to a lot of small comforts until the numbers finally lined up. When they did, I did not rush. I checked everything twice, then a third time because I had learned the hard way that paperwork mattered more than passion. I pulled the HOA bylaws from their website and printed them out, highlighter in hand. Garages were allowed. The maximum size was 900 square feet. Mine was 800. Setbacks were clearly defined. Colors had to match the primary residence. Mine did. Before a single shovel hit the ground, I went down to the municipal office, stood in line, answered questions, and walked out with a building permit that had enough stamps on it to look like a passport. I hired a licensed contractor, pulled their credentials, and made sure inspections were scheduled properly. Then I sent the required notice to the HOA, 30 days in advance, exactly as the bylaws demanded. I kept a copy for myself and didn't think about it again. The construction took 6 weeks. I watched the garage rise the way other people watch sunsets, with quiet satisfaction and a sense that something was finally clicking into place. The framing went up clean, the concrete cured perfectly, and when the doors were installed, they rolled open like they'd been waiting for me all along. When the final inspection passed, I stood inside that empty space and imagined the projects to come. The smell of fresh lumber mixed with oil and dust already felt like home. The next morning, I was still riding that high when the knock came. It wasn't the friendly tap of a neighbor dropping off misdelivered mail. It was sharp, deliberate, the kind of knock that assumed it would be answered. When I opened the door, Doran McLaughlin stood there with a tight smile and a thick folder clutched against her chest like a shield. I recognized her immediately. Everyone in Willow Creek did. She was the HOA president, 7 years running, and she had a reputation that traveled faster than gossip. Rules were her religion, and she worshipped loudly. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She stepped forward, glanced past me toward the garage, and informed me that my new structure violated HOA regulations. According to her, I had built without proper approval from the architectural committee and would be required to remove the garage within 60 days. The way she said it, calm and almost cheerful, made it sound like she was doing me a favor. I told her I had a municipal permit and that I had sent the required notice. She corrected me immediately. Notice was not approval. Approval required an explicit response from the committee. I told her no response within 30 days counted as approval under the bylaws. She smiled wider and pulled a letter from her folder, dated 28 days before construction began, denying my request. I stared at the paper and felt the first cold thread of something unpleasant wind its way into my chest. I had never seen that letter before. Doran watched my face like she was checking off items on a list, clearly enjoying the moment. She said the committee had done its job and that any further discussion would be pointless. Then she reminded me of the penalties for non-compliance and turned to leave, heels clicking on my porch like a countdown. When the door closed, the house felt quieter than it had a moment before. I stood there holding a copy of a letter that claimed to change everything and knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never received it. The garage was still there, solid and real, but the sense of victory I'd felt the day before was gone, replaced by a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. Something had shifted, and Willow Creek suddenly felt a lot smaller. After Doran left, I spent the next hour pacing the garage like a caged animal. My eyes kept drifting back to the letter she'd handed me, sitting on the workbench next to a fresh socket set I hadn't even opened yet. I read it again. Still the same. Dated 2 days before the end of the 30-day window, stamped with some half-assed, official-looking header, and signed by Doran herself. It wasn't even on HOA letterhead, just plain printer paper. Something about it smelled off. The whole thing felt like theater. And if there's one thing I hate, it's being played for an audience without knowing I'm in the scene. I went back into the house and dug through my files. I had the original HOA bylaws printed out and annotated, underlined in red. There it was, black and white. Failure of the Architectural Committee to respond within 30 calendar days of receipt of notification shall constitute automatic approval. Not may, not subject to interpretation. Shall. I wasn't a lawyer, but I could read plain English. Just to be sure, I checked the copy of my notification email, sent 34 days before construction started, time-stamped. Attached were the full construction plans, color samples, survey documents, and the permit. I even double-checked the delivery receipt. It went through. No bounce, no error. If they'd had something to say, they had every chance to say it. But that denial letter, that had never arrived. I tore through my email inbox just to be sure. Nothing. I checked spam, trash, even the damn promotions tab. Nada. Then I went out to the mailbox and opened the rusted metal flap like I expected to find a confession waiting inside. Bills, coupons, a real estate flyer offering to buy my house, as is. No letter. I went back inside and tried something I hadn't done in years. I called the post office. After a 15-minute hold that felt like slow torture by flute music, I got a clerk named Dana. She was cheerful, probably too cheerful for someone dealing with the general public all day. I asked if there had been any certified or registered mail sent to my address around the date on Doran's letter. She put me on another hold, and when she came back, her voice was different, more neutral. She said, "No record of certified mail from the Willow Creek HOA, or any sender, around that time." I asked if there was a chance they just didn't scan it. She paused. "If it was certified, we would have scanned it." End of story. That's when it really clicked. Doran hadn't just been bending the rules, she'd broken them. According to the HOA's own bylaws, official notices had to be sent by certified mail with delivery confirmation. That wasn't a suggestion, it was a procedural requirement. No confirmation, no validity. I stared at the fake rejection letter again. Either she never sent it and just printed it off for dramatic effect, or she sent it via regular mail and hoped I wouldn't notice. Either way, it didn't meet the requirement, and that meant, legally speaking, the garage was approved by default. She knew it too. That smug little grin wasn't just self-righteousness, it was a bluff. She was betting I wouldn't fight back. Too bad for her, I've always been bad at folding. That evening, I scanned every relevant document, the permit, the notification email, the bylaws, and my call record with the post office. I labeled each file like I was prepping for a damn trial, because something told me I'd need all of it sooner rather than later. I sat in the kitchen afterward, drinking a beer that had gone warm, staring at nothing. The garage lights were still on. They made the space look warm and inviting, like a reward I had earned. And now someone was trying to take it from me on a technicality she made up. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had proof. And when you're up against someone who plays dirty, proof is better than hope. The first fine came on a Wednesday, slipped into my mailbox inside an envelope so thick it might as well have had its own gravity. "Notice of violation," it screamed in bold all caps across the top, followed by a cheerful little line. "You are hereby assessed a penalty of $500 for unauthorized construction." Beneath that was a list of secondary violations, each, one more creatively absurd than the last. Failure to obtain architectural committee approval, false. Violation of aesthetic standards, vague. And, my personal favorite, disruption of neighborhood harmony. They tacked on $100 per day for each day the violation continued, which, according to them, meant each day my very much legally approved garage existed. 3 weeks in, the total hit $2,600. That's when I stopped counting. I didn't call. I didn't go to their office. I called my lawyer. Joanna Ellis had been recommended by a customer of mine, a guy who'd gone through something similar with another HOA over a solar panel installation. She had a calm voice, a surgical mind, and the quiet fury of someone who'd made a career out of dismantling bureaucratic bullshit one clause at a time. After I sent her the documents, she called me back in under an hour. "Okay," she said, the sound of pages flipping in the background. "They've got a problem. The bylaws are clear. No certified rejection equals automatic approval. If they can't prove they sent that letter correctly, their denial is invalid, and the fines are unenforceable." I asked if that meant I could ignore them. She chuckled. "You could, but they'll just escalate. What we want is to get ahead of it. Go on the offensive, not defensive. We'll send a formal demand for proof of delivery. Certified mail only. If they can't produce a USPS receipt or a signature, we have grounds to challenge everything. And if they try to lien your property, we'll take them to court for harassment and abuse of process." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, for about 6 hours. The next morning, I got an email, HOA letterhead, no subject line, just a PDF attachment titled Outstanding Balance Notice. They were now threatening to initiate lien proceedings against my home if I didn't pay by the end of the month. I forwarded it to Joanna. Her response, "Let them try." This is textbook bluffing. But Doran wasn't just bluffing, she was escalating. A week later, I found a bright yellow poster zip-tied to the fence post by my driveway. Community notice, violation under review. It had my name, my address, and a bullet point list of my infractions. I tore it down, but not before snapping a picture. I found out later she'd posted the same sign on the bulletin board near the community pool and sent an update to the HOA mailing list. Neighbors started looking at me differently. Some gave me that sympathetic nod you reserve for people going through messy divorces. Others avoided eye contact altogether. One guy down the street, Craig something, actually slowed his SUV, rolled down the window and said, "You know, man, you should have just asked for permission like the rest of us." I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, it'd come out in ways Craig wasn't ready to hear. Meanwhile, Joanna sent her official letter to the HOA board, a demand for documentation of the rejection letter's mailing, including the required certified mail receipt and USPS tracking confirmation. She gave them 14 days to respond. They didn't. I figured they'd at least pretend to be cooperative, send a vague reply, cite delays, claim someone was on vacation, but the response was silence. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. Not a call, not an email. I asked Joanna if that helped or hurt us. "It helps," she said. "It confirms they don't have it. They're hoping you'll fold before we push." I didn't fold. I started digging. I reread the bylaws, highlighted everything related to enforcement, appeals, committee structure, and architectural reviews. The deeper I looked, the more things didn't add up. The architectural committee was supposed to consist of at least 3 members, but no names were listed anywhere in the recent HOA bulletins. Every letter I'd gotten came from Doran herself. I started to suspect the committee wasn't a committee at all. I emailed a few neighbors I trusted, people I'd waved to over the years, shared tools with, helped jumpstart their cars. A couple responded cautiously. One of them, Sarah from 4 houses down, wrote, "I tried to get a gazebo approved last summer. They denied it without explanation. Doran said it didn't fit the community aesthetic. I asked for the names of the committee. She said it was confidential." Another email came in anonymously. "You're not the only one she's targeted. Some of us are just scared to speak out. If you fight this, fight hard. She's been untouchable for years." Untouchable. That word stuck with me. It wasn't just about my grudge anymore. Doran had made herself into some kind of suburban tyrant, draped in bylaws and weaponized newsletters. I wasn't interested in a war, but if she wanted one, she just got it. It was a Saturday morning, just after 9. Sunlight filtered through the trees and fractured beams, and the only sound on my lot was the soft purr of a rebuilt engine running smooth for the first time in years. I had the hood up on my '69 Mustang Fastback, the deep metallic green catching the light just right. I was elbow deep in brake lines, grease on my forearms, a cup of lukewarm black coffee on the toolbox beside me, and a look of quiet satisfaction that comes from doing something right with your own 2 hands. Then came the sirens. Not the blaring kind, but the subtle whoop of a short chirp, police style. I wiped my hands and stepped outside the garage, squinting against the sunlight. 2 black and whites had pulled up in tandem, tires crunching softly over gravel. 4 officers stepped out, 2 male, 2 female, all business. And standing just behind them, arms crossed and smug as a cat who'd pissed in the punch bowl, was Doran McLaughlin. She was wearing one of her usual pastel cardigan sets, hair pinned into a tight bun that probably hadn't moved since the late 90s. She stood with her back perfectly straight, eyes locked on me like I was about to confess something. I raised both hands and wiped a streak of oil across my cheek in the process. "Morning, officers. What's the emergency?" The lead officer, a guy with salt and pepper stubble and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward. "Are you Brandon Wilkes?" I nodded. "Yep, what's going on?" "We received a report of unauthorized construction on this property. We're here to verify permits and ensure there are no code violations." I could feel Doran's grin from 20 feet away. She didn't say a word, just stood there like she was finally watching the guillotine drop. I exhaled through my nose, calm. "Sure, come on in." I led them into the garage, still smelling of fresh rubber and carb cleaner. I handed the officer a folder from the workbench, clearly labeled, color-coded, and more organized than most DMV offices. "Here's the building permit issued by the county, contractor's license and business card, signed inspection report dated last month, zoning compliance letter from the planning department. And just for fun, here's the HOA bylaws with the automatic approval clause highlighted." The officer flipped through the documents, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he glanced back at the garage, took in the walls, the roof line, the color-matched siding, the trim that matched my house to the inch. He nodded. "This all looks legit to me," he said. "You've got your ducks in a row." I shrugged. "I try." Doran stepped forward like she'd just been personally betrayed. "But he didn't get HOA approval. That's a violation of our community guidelines. He's ignored the authority of the architectural committee and built a structure that violates our harmony." The second officer, a woman with a calm voice and tired eyes, replied before I had to. "Ma'am, with all due respect, HOA disputes are civil matters. This is private property, and he has a legal permit from the county. We can't enforce HOA bylaws." Doran's voice went up half an octave. "But it's illegal under our rules. You have to do something." The lead officer turned to her, deadpan. "Unless he's breaking state or municipal law, there's nothing we can do. The garage is permitted. That makes it legal. If you want to pursue a civil claim, that's up to your board." Her face turned crimson. "I want him arrested. He's defying the authority of the HOA." The officer gave a tight smile. "Ma'am, if you don't calm down, we may have to ask you to step back." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, like a trout gasping on a dock. She pointed at me, her hand shaking. "This isn't over." "Sure doesn't feel like it," I said dryly. The officers left after about 15 more minutes of polite paperwork talk. No warnings, no citations, no lectures, just 4 professionals doing their job and finding no reason to get involved in petty neighbor drama. I stood in the driveway as they pulled away. Doran stayed frozen in place for another few seconds, as if she couldn't quite accept what had just happened. Then she pivoted hard on one heel and marched back toward her house without another word. But that wasn't the end of it. The next morning, someone or something had sprayed bright red paint across the front of my garage doors. Huge letters, ILLEG, ALSTRUCTURE. The paint was fresh, still dripping slightly. No signature, no tags, just the message. I took a deep breath, stared at it, and went back inside. 15 minutes later, I had the security cameras unpacked from the closet where they'd been sitting for 6 months. I'd always told myself I didn't need them, that Willow Creek was safe enough, and my place backed up to woods, not people. I wasn't telling myself that anymore. By noon, the cameras were up, 2 outside, 1 inside the garage, all hooked to a local server and mirrored to cloud storage. Anyone who came back would be making a permanent appearance in the courtroom highlight reel. I didn't bother reporting the graffiti. We both knew who was behind it, even if she didn't hold the can herself. But now I had a strategy. Let her keep escalating, keep digging that hole, while I quietly built the case against her 1 receipt, 1 screenshot, 1 insult at a time. And just like that, my garage went from dream project to legal fortress. Not exactly how I'd planned it, but then again, I wasn't the one who decided to start a war over a slab of concrete and some sheet metal. For a few days, it was quiet. Too quiet. No fines, no letters, no Facebook rants in the neighborhood group about rogue structures or unchecked masculinity. Doran had gone dark, and that wasn't comforting. With someone like her, silence wasn't peace. It was planning. Then came the petition. I found a printed flyer taped to my mailbox one morning, tucked neatly under the flag like it belonged there. The headline was in bold caps, "Concerned residents demand action against unauthorized construction." Beneath that was a list of grievances, all carefully worded to sound legal, but vague enough to avoid direct liability. Noise pollution, visual. Obstruction, encouraging a precedent of non-compliance. At the bottom were a dozen signatures. I recognized a few names. Most I didn't. The HOA had 80 homes. 12 wasn't a majority, not even close, but it was enough to suggest Doran wasn't acting completely alone. Or so it seemed. Later that same afternoon, I got a different kind of note, folded and taped to my front door like some clandestine spy delivery. No return address, no signature, just block letters scrawled in clean handwriting. She's lying about the vote. Half those people didn't even know what they were signing. Some never saw the garage. Ask Craig from the 19th house. He told her he trusted you. She added his name anyway. You didn't hear it from me. JD. I stood on my porch for a long moment, rereading the note, heart beating slow and hard. It felt like a shift in the ground, confirmation that someone inside Doran's circle was cracking. I checked the address. Craig, the same guy who'd rolled down his window to scold me like I was a bad puppy. That guy. I knocked on his door the next day. It was awkward. He opened with a forced smile that quickly faded when I showed him a copy of the petition. I asked if he'd signed it. He looked at it, squinted, then said, "I told her I didn't want to get involved. That's not my signature." Boom. I didn't tell him about the note, just thanked him and left. That evening, I sent Joanna a full scan of the petition along with Craig's denial. Her response, "Fraudulent petitioning. Nice. She just gave us more leverage." But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, a city zoning inspector showed up. Apparently, there had been an anonymous complaint filed with the county, alleging that I was operating a commercial auto repair shop out of my residential garage. Classic HOA tactic. I greeted the inspector with a smile and a cup of coffee. Gave him a full tour. No cash register, no signage, no business licenses posted. Just personal projects. A Mustang, a Harley under a tarp, and some spare parts stacked neatly against the wall. He asked if I charged people for work. I said, only in beer and appreciation. He laughed, wrote down some notes, left me with a signed inspection clearance and a nod. Case closed. I didn't even have to guess where that complaint came from. Later that night, while cleaning up in the garage, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Keep documentation. She's rewriting meeting minutes after the fact. Your denial was filed 2 weeks after build started. It wasn't real. She forged it. You didn't hear it from me. D. This time, I knew it wasn't just a disgruntled neighbor. This was someone inside. Someone who had access to internal documents. Someone who knew how Doran operated and wanted it to stop. I showed the text to Joanna. She asked if I could trace the number. I couldn't. It was a burner, but it didn't matter. The information lined up. I'd already been suspicious about the date on that supposed denial letter. Now we had more than suspicion. We had whistleblowing. That same night, I dug deeper. I submitted a formal request under HOA transparency requirements for all minutes of architectural committee meetings from the past 12 months. I used the language straight from the bylaws. Hard to ignore, harder to stonewall. 4 days later, I got a flash drive in the mail. No envelope, just the stick taped inside a plain, folded piece of paper. No note, no explanation. I plugged it in. 14 meeting logs, all of them signed only by one name, Doran McLaughlin. No other signatures, no second opinions, no voting records, just a tidy list of applications and a verdict next to each one. Of the 14 requests, 8 were approved, 6 denied. All 6 denials came from homeowners who had previously challenged Doran or voted against her in board elections. All 8 approvals, her allies, friends, neighbors on her street. One guy had 2 different approvals within the same quarter. There was no committee. She was the committee. The most damning part. My own rejection was listed as being processed 2 weeks after construction started, meaning it didn't even exist during the required 30-day window. Forged, filed late, backdated, and now caught. I sat in the garage, lights off, just the soft tick of cooling metal around me. I thought about the years Doran must have spent tightening her grip, one permit at a time, one fake vote after another. And now, for the first time, she had a leak. I didn't know who Dee was, but I was going to win this war. With facts, with paper, and with whoever the hell was standing in her shadows. I didn't sleep much the night I opened that flash drive. The weight of it, the precision, the strategy, the sheer arrogance of what Doran had been doing kept looping in my head like a bad country song on broken radio. But it wasn't just anger anymore, it was calculation. I had her. I knew it. And someone on the inside, Dee, knew it too. Joanna was almost giddy when I called her the next morning. "This is gold," she said, practically vibrating through the phone. "Forget your garage for a second. This is systemic abuse of authority. Document forgery, selective enforcement, and manipulation of board powers. We need to move fast." I could hear her clicking away on a keyboard as she talked. "We're sending a certified letter to the entire HOA board, demanding an emergency meeting, citing specific bylaw violations, and requesting public access to architectural committee governance. We're also going to include anonymized excerpts from these meeting minutes, and let's see if anyone else starts sweating," I asked. "And if they ignore us again, we go public," she said. "No more quiet war. It's time to blow the doors off this HOA." By Monday, every mailbox in Willow Creek had a white envelope with URGENT, HOAMEMBERSHIPNOTICE printed in red across the front. Inside was a calm, surgical breakdown of everything Doran had done. Proof she'd denied applications only from residents who'd challenged her authority. A timeline showing my rejection was logged after my garage was already half built. Comparison of approved permits, most going to her friends or those who donated to her re-election campaign. A reminder that the architectural committee is required to consist of at least 3 members, of which Doran was apparently all 3. It hit like a brick through a stained glass window. The group chat on Facebook exploded. My inbox was flooded with messages from neighbors. Some apologized. Some were furious. A few were cautiously supportive, asking, "What happens now?" But the best message I got was short, unsigned. "She's unraveling. Her mask is slipping. You've got her." D. By Thursday, the board caved. An emergency town hall was scheduled for the following Tuesday night. No Zoom, in person, every household invited, no proxies, just bodies and chairs and voices in a room. The meeting was held at the elementary school gymnasium just outside the neighborhood. When I arrived, there were already 60 people inside. By 7 o'clock, it was standing room only. Folding chairs scraped across the floor as latecomers poured in. Someone had set up a projector. Joanna was seated up front, calm as a surgeon. Then Doran walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual pastel armor. This time, it was navy blue, power blazer over a white blouse, hair perfectly stiff. But something in her face had changed. Still stern, still proud, but tighter around the eyes. Controlled panic disguised as confidence. She took the mic like a politician at a press conference. "Good evening, neighbors. I know there's been a lot of miscommunication lately, and I'd like to address a few points." But she didn't get far. Sarah from down the street stood up. "Why did you deny my gazebo application when it was within all guidelines?" Doran blinked. "That decision was made based on aesthetic." "You mean because I didn't vote for you last year?" Sarah fired back. Another voice. "You said my fence was too high, but Bob got one taller. He donated to your fundraiser." A murmur turned to murmurs, turned to shouting. Then Mark Powell stood up. Until that moment, he'd been just a quiet neighbor who always waved from his porch. But now he pulled a folded document from his coat pocket and said, loud enough for the whole gym to hear, "I was on the architectural committee for 2 years, until Doran forced me out. She told me point blank that she didn't need my signature to approve or deny anything, that she'd just file it without me." A few people gasped. One woman dropped her purse. Doran tried to interject. "Mark, that's not—" "I recorded the conversation," he said. He pulled out his phone. The audio was tinny, but the voice was unmistakably hers. "I don't need you, Mark. I am the committee. These people don't read the bylaws anyway." The room exploded. Joanna stepped forward with a copy of the bylaws, highlighted in fluorescent yellow. 3 members minimum. No unilateral decisions. No backdated filings. Your entire year of approvals and denials is illegitimate. Doran lost it. "This is a setup. He's lying. They're all lying." But then another voice. Mr. Hill, the HOA's treasurer, stood up. A quiet man, balding, Mild. "I don't want to be part of this anymore," he said, flat. "I was told to make payments under administrative expenses that I couldn't trace, over $8,000. I wanted to believe she was just efficient. But I think we all know what happened, and just like that, the dam broke. A vote was called, 71 households represented, 67 voted for removal, 4 abstained. Doran was removed as HOA president effective immediately. Her replacement? A rotating interim board pending full elections. She didn't say a word as she walked out, just turned, heels echoing across the gym floor, and disappeared into the dark parking lot. Joanna leaned over to me and whispered, "We're not done." And we weren't. Not even close. 3 days after Doran was removed from office, I got a letter. Real envelope. Real certified mail. Return address from a law firm out of town. I signed for it, walked inside, and slid it open with a box cutter I'd been using to open spark plug boxes. Inside, a countersuit. She was suing me. Defamation, character assassination, emotional distress resulting from a coordinated campaign of slander and humiliation. 25 pages of legal-sounding theater accusing me and Joanna of orchestrating a smear campaign, manipulating HOA members, falsifying records, and weaponizing community unrest for personal satisfaction. It was almost funny. Almost. I scanned it, sent it to Joanna, then cracked a beer and waited for her callback. It didn't take long. "She's desperate," Joanna said. "This is a bluff, and not even a good one. Filing a suit with no hard evidence, no damages, and nothing to back up her timeline. It'll get tossed, and when it does, we'll countersue for malicious prosecution." "But won't this slow things down?" I asked. "Sure. That's the point. She's hoping to muddy the waters, delay the real lawsuit, and maybe scare you into dropping it." I didn't drop it. The original suit, my suit, had already been filed. We were suing the HOA and Doran personally for damages, falsification of records, harassment, violation of due process, illegal fines, and slander. Now it was 2 cases running in parallel. Joanna filed a motion to dismiss Doran's countersuit with prejudice. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Until then, I kept my head down, kept working, and waited. But the best part, Doran didn't know that her worst enemy wasn't in the courtroom. It was still Dee. I got another message. "She's shredding things. HOA storage room, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Get proof." I stared at the phone. It buzzed again. "I've seen the bank statements. The admin expenses were cash withdrawals. She took funds personally. You'll get the records soon. Keep your eyes open." Tuesday, I drove by the HOA office. Not a real office, just a rented unit in a strip mall next to a vape shop and a failing bakery. I parked, sat with my headlights off, and waited. At 7:06 p.m., Doran pulled up. She looked over her shoulder twice before unlocking the glass door. Inside, the lights flicked on. I saw her silhouette moving, boxes stacked, papers pulled, and then a shredder started whining. I didn't confront her. I didn't knock. I just held up my phone and recorded everything from the windshield. Timestamp, GPS. Her inside, feeding document after document into a black shredder like she was trying to erase reality. The next morning, Joanna filed an emergency preservation request and notified the court of potential spoliation of evidence. Doran's countersuit hearing was 2 days later. She walked into court wearing a gray suit and sunglasses like she was on trial for insider trading. Joanna was calm, confident, surgical as always. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience, listened to both sides. Joanna presented the timeline, the forged denial letter, the audio of her admitting to unilateral decisions, the photos, the Facebook post where Doran called me a liar who manipulates rule-hating malcontents, the video of her destroying documents. The judge cut the hearing short. She dismissed Doran's lawsuit as baseless and retaliatory, citing an overwhelming lack of evidence and an alarming pattern of abuse of power. Then came the twist. The judge added an order. Doran would pay an additional $5,000 for court costs, personally, and her case would be referred for investigation into obstruction of justice for the document destruction. As we walked out of the courthouse, Joanna leaned in with a grin. "She played stupid games," I smirked, "and won felony prizes." But we weren't done. 1 week later, the results of a forensic audit landed in Joanna's inbox. It came from one of the interim board members, a retired IRS agent who volunteered to dig into the HOA's books. The report showed over $8,400 misallocated over 3 years. Administrative travel, software fees, consulting, all traced back to Doran's personal accounts. She'd been reimbursing herself for expenses that didn't exist. When confronted, she claimed they were verbal approvals from previous treasurers. But Mr. Hill had already signed a sworn affidavit. No approvals, no votes, just theft. The new board moved to file criminal charges. The county prosecutor picked it up. Suddenly, Doran wasn't just the HOA villain. She was facing 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and a felony fraud charge that would stick with her like rust on chrome. They offered a plea deal. She took it, paid the $8,000 back, took the conviction, lost her professional license as a CPA. Meanwhile, our lawsuit wrapped up. The court awarded me $22,000, covering the illegal fines, court costs, and damages for harassment. Doran was ordered to pay $5,000 personally for defamation, her slander in the Facebook post, plus the graffiti. Yeah, we had proof it came from her nephew. The judge ended her ruling with something I'll never forget. When leadership becomes dictatorship, the law steps in. This wasn't about a garage. This was about power, and power abused. I drove home that afternoon in silence. The garage door opened smooth and clean. Inside, peace, and a half-restored Mustang, waiting like nothing had ever happened. 6 weeks after the final court ruling, a for sale sign appeared on Doran's front lawn. Bright red letters on whiteboard, leaning slightly in the breeze like even the wood was tired of standing with her. The blinds in her windows stayed shut. No activity, no visitors, no pastel outfits watering flowers, just silence. Like the house was already empty, even if she wasn't gone yet. Nobody waved when she drove past. Nobody brought baked goods or gossip. Willow Creek had turned on her, not out of malice, but out of the kind of slow, irreversible rejection that only a tight-knit community can inflict. She'd lost more than a case. She'd lost face. And I got my Saturdays back. The Mustang was finally road-ready, fresh coat of deep emerald paint, new suspension, and an engine that purred like a big cat after a heavy meal. I took her out on a long drive past the lake, radio off, windows down, the smell of gas and pine filling the cab like victory. But I wasn't done. One Sunday morning, I hosted an open garage day. Flyers taped to light poles posted on the community board, even stuck a notice in the HOA newsletter, now written by someone with a soul. Come see the garage that started a war, it said. Barbecue at noon, tools on display, coffee and donuts in the morning. Bring your kids. And they came. Families, couples, even a few old-timers I hadn't seen in years. Sarah brought brownies. Mr. Hill showed up with his teenage son and shook my hand like I'd rebuilt his spine. Mark Powell, the whistleblower, brought his old Chevelle, and we spent an hour just swapping carburetor war stories. Craig from House 19 came too. Turns out he'd bought an old Jeep to restore. We agreed to trade tools. It wasn't just a party. It was an exorcism. Around 2 in the afternoon, one of the newer neighbors, a guy in his 30s, fresh beard, baby strapped to his chest, looked around my garage, took in the clean floor, the shining tools, the perfectly balanced lift, and said, "Man, this is legit." "Thanks," I replied. "No, really," he added. "I mean, after all that crap they gave you, it's kind of amazing you didn't just give up." I took a swig of root beer and smiled. I wasn't fighting for a garage. I was fighting because someone told me I wasn't allowed to build one, even after I followed the rules. He nodded. Yeah, that's the part that pissed me off the most. Before the crowd thinned, I climbed onto a folding chair and tapped a wrench against the frame of my lift. Everyone turned. I didn't give a speech. I'm no orator, but I said this. I just want to thank everyone who came out. This garage was a dream of mine. It became a nightmare because of one person who forgot that rules aren't weapons. I didn't win because I had money or power. I won because I had proof. I had help, and I had enough stubbornness to outlast the bullshit. So if you ever get told you can't do something just because someone thinks they can stop you, remember this garage. People clapped, someone cheered, someone else yelled, "Hell yeah!" I think it was Sarah. Later that week, I installed a metal plaque above the garage door, custom made, brushed steel, built legally, inspected twice. Try me. One evening, a moving van pulled into Doran's driveway. She stood outside for a few minutes, arms crossed, staring at the boxes like she couldn't believe any of this was real. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked hollow. I didn't wave. She didn't look at my house. She got in her car and drove off. The new HOA board, now made up of 5 people, including Sarah and Mark, rewrote the architectural review rules. Now, all requests had to be acknowledged within 14 days. All votes were logged. All meetings open. No more committees of one. No more silence mistaken for consent. A few months later, someone asked me if I'd consider running for the board myself. I laughed. God, no. But I'll fix their brakes. I still don't know who Dee was. The texts stopped after the trial. The last one came the night Doran lost the countersuit. She's finished. Garage looks good. Enjoy the silence. Dee. And I did. Because in the end, it wasn't about one garage. It was about someone who thought she could rewrite reality, someone who thought fear and paperwork could replace fairness, and someone who forgot that the rules work both ways, especially when you know how to read them.